Hello and welcome to another episode of the Can't Speak podcast. Thanks for joining us again, and we have another legend of the game this time round. Thanks to everyone so far who has downloaded and donated. We passed 500 downloads combined with the Bill Ashurst and Andy Gregory ones, so thanks for all your support. Please give us a share to your family, friends, workmates, postman's dog, whoever loves a bit of rugby league. This episode we have one of the first men to make the switch from rugby union to rugby league in the early 60s, going on to win a Challenge Cup and many more along the way. It's Peter Harvey.
Thank you for that introduction. I'd love to say it was correct, but it isn't.
Oh, here we go.
Rugby League players have been playing... Rugby Union players have come over to Rugby League throughout the century. The whole breakup in 1895 was about... whether you could get paid for playing, but actually it was called broken time payments. And I was looking at some records of clubs recently, particularly in the 1930s when St Helens, Rex and St Helens was there. And there were many players that came from Rugby Union to Rugby League. The point was that there was so little money around that the fact that a player could get 6 shillings, which is what it was, for a Saturday, was important to them. And the difference between the ones that could afford not to have that 6 shillings and the ones that needed the 6 shillings was the difference between the people that played rugby union and the people that played rugby league. The interesting thing to me, and I didn't know this until very recently, you had to be at work to be able to get that 6 shillings.
Right.
Because it was broken time payment. And if you weren't breaking time, in other words, if you weren't losing a shift, you couldn't get the 6 shillings. Now, how's that for a different world, right? Now, professionalism, as defined by the rugby union in those days, was anything for which you were paid. So whether you got a new suit or they got you a job or they had your position in a company or whatever, that was all thought of professionalism. And professionalism was really looked down upon.
Right.
Now, you are right, insofar as I played rugby union from school days through to England trials, and then came over to rugby league. But that great St Helens side of 66 had 16 rugby union players playing in it. It wasn't only me.
Well, you were part of, I suppose, maybe a bigger wave that was coming with your Ray French and stuff like that.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right.
I do know a little bit, don't worry.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. But it is very hard for people of the present generation to even imagine what it was like.
Totally,
in those days.
Absolutely.
Well, for us, when we've all been researching and reading about the time and stuff, like you say, it's a different. We're all under 30, we're all big into rugby league nowadays, and I imagine a lot of people like us and a bit older don't understand what it was like for players at that time. Like you've said to me beforehand about you don't think of yourself as, say, a legend of the game or like, you're part of a legendary team. But a lot of people won't know a lot of names even, or they'll know the names but they don't know what was involved in being a player at that time.
That's true. And I think that the idea that somehow or another, I'm going to track straight away. As a 12-year-old boy, I first went watching the Saints playing down at Knowsley Road there. And I was drawn because Jimmy Sullivan had come.
Right.
And do you know who Jimmy Sullivan was? Yeah. He was a Wigan player.
He
came from Wales. He's a legend in the game.
Yes.
And he played for Great Britain in the 1930s, and he went on to coach St Helens from 1952 onwards. And he achieved what nobody else had achieved before. He got them to Wembley.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the holy grail, as far as rugby league players are concerned, is to get to Wembley.
Yeah.
You'll find that with whoever you talk to. That even if they've toured or whatever, to get to Wembley is the thing that they want to do. Yeah. And to get to Wembley and win, a very small percentage of people have ever done that. I don't know what the number is. It'd be interesting to look it up. But we're talking about 100, couple of hundred, not many more than that, because by the time you put them together, the ones who's got 1 or 2 or 3 medals, the number gets down really low.
I got the number wrong with Andy Gregory, and he weren't happy with that.
Well, because he talked about his 9 Wembleys in a row, and but you see what they do. The Wigan lads do acknowledge is that they became professional.
That's it. Yeah.
When everybody else were amateurs.
Yeah.
And the difference between us as semi-professional, I only ever say I was semi-professional. I talk about semi-professional, is that we all had another job.
Yeah.
And I think that's one hell of a difference to what happens when you stop playing.
Yeah.
It also makes a big difference to you in your own personal ambition. Andy Gregory, outside of work, he did have a job. He was self-employed. He was a scrap man, he says in this thing there.
Yeah.
Right? As was Vinty Corellius, who was a great player for St Helens. One of my boyhood heroes would be Vinty Corellius.
Right.
And I love Vinty Corellius because his muscles bounced. When he ran, his muscles bounced. And you just could tell, he was an animal type
Big
of
figure,
person. He wasn't actually huge, but he was an animal, the wild bull of the campus. You know why they called him the wild bull of the campus?
No,
Because he couldn't spell Corellius.
fair enough.
But Corellius, along with Alan Prescott, they were actually playing in the team. They lost the final in 1953 against Halifax, and they won the final in 1956. And I was at both those games, so I was fired up for that. And in the book, I talk about the town hall and town hall steps, and to be on the town hall steps is one of those real ambitions of anybody. That if you were a lad and you were standing watching your heroes on the town hall steps, holding up the cup, perhaps one day you'd think, well, I want to be like that. Actually, I don't remember that. I don't think that I ever wanted to achieve that. That was not my ambition. Because I suppose it was too far away. My first hero was a man called Peter Metcalfe, who I know you won't know. But Peter Metcalfe, he broke his knee. And within 2 seasons he'd finished. That was his. So he could never be a legend because he couldn't play long enough. But for me, he was my boyhood hero. And one of the reasons he was a boyhood hero is because he lived around the corner from me, and he was a real man. And you could go and talk to him, and he was a real person. All those other people who were on that pitch, they weren't real. They were all figments of your own imagination. And I projected onto Vinty Corellius what I thought he was like.
Of course. That's what you do as a kid, isn't it? It's
That's
like
right.
the superheroes to you. Or whatever,
And all the tales of Vinty Corellius are of him being mean and nasty and violent and vigorous and all of those things. And in reality, he was a hell of a nice bloke. Alan Prescott was the captain of the side, and he was a hero. He was a hero because he was the man who, against Australia in 1958, broke his arm and then carried on playing for the whole match.
Jeez.
Can you imagine that? Can you imagine?
Doesn't happen now, does it?
No, that's madness.
You can't. It is madness, isn't it? The fact was, there were no substitutes in those days. Right? So he was the captain and he had the responsibility. David Bolton, who was the Wigan standoff, he broke his collarbone and he was off the pitch, and another player had gone off as well. So there were 2 men short against Australia in a test match. Right? And the manager said to Alan, "Look, Alan, you broke your shoulder, you broke your arm, you better come off." And Alan said, "I can't. I've got to go on. It's my responsibility to see this test through." And the only thing that he did was move from open side to blind side, so that he wouldn't have to push. Because these in the days of contested scrums, so they were all pushing on there. Right? Now, I never understood that, right? Until one day, in about 2000, 2002, something like that, I was up in the boardroom at St Helens with Eric Ashton.
All right.
And Eric Ashton had been everywhere, done everything with Wigan, and then he came to Saints. He was the coach at Saints, and he finished up as the president of the club at St Helens. And I was saying to him about this thing, I couldn't understand this about Prescott, how he could manage to do it. And I said, but you're forgetting about Vinty. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, at half time when we went out, Vinty went to standoff. And he lined up the Australian pack. And he said, if any of you put him in hospital, I personally will put you in hospital. And none of them ever did.
No.
Yeah.
Now, that is something which has happened within the white lines, which nobody off the pitch would ever know.
Absolutely.
But that's come from Eric Ashton, who was on that field at that time. They get from there.
Right.
But Alan Prescott figures in my life because as I was going through the schoolboy system, and I was doing well in the schoolboy system, and of course, people must have talked about selectors to you because you get nowhere without selectors. If you don't get selected, you're not there, right? Now, very often, being selected is a chance thing. I can demonstrate this to you easily, but I was doing quite well and I was doing quite nicely, and I finished up playing for England schools, which was so unusual and it's unbelievable, and I don't know how it happened. But Saints knew it happened, and they asked me to go and see them, and I went to see the chairman, and he had Alan Prescott with him.
Yeah.
Now, Alan Prescott knew my dad, and I think I told you my dad was a professional boxer, had been a professional boxer, and he was quite well known. So Alan knew my dad, and my dad let me go up there on my own, and I went in, and of course Mr. Cook did what he always does and says, oh, you're the best player around, we must get you to sign for us, and we'll sign you now before you go to college, and we know you're going to be away for 3 years, but when you come back we have first option on your signature, right?
Yeah.
And we'll pay your expenses while you're away, and we'll give you a bursary, and we'll look after your mum and your dad, and that sort of thing.
How old are you at this point?
18.
18.
I'm 18.
It's a lot of faith in
Just
an
played for
18-year-old
England
lad.
schools,
Yeah.
right? And I was due to go to college in the September, and this is probably in the July, August. And Alan Prescott said to Mr. Cook, Mr. Cook, I'd like to show a piece of the facilities. Now, the facilities, there was a new stand built at Saints in 1957, right? And all he did was took me under the stand, and we had a look at the running track, which was literally, some cinders running down the inside of the running track. And he stopped and he said, now listen, Peter, he said, listen very carefully to what I'm going to tell you. He said, whatever you do today, do not sign any forms at all. You understand what I'm telling you?
Right.
So I said, why? He said, well, because they want you very badly. You're doing very, very well. And if you carry on doing what you're doing now, in 3 years' time, you'll be playing for England. And if you're playing for England in 3 years' time, they'll be there with a checkbook and they'll want you a lot more than they're going to be telling you now, right? You understand what I'm telling you? So I said, yes. So we go back upstairs and we get back there, and they bring out the forms to me, and Alan says, it's a very good deal, this, Peter. He said, you should sign this. He said, he said, they're going to look after you all the time you're away, and you're going to get spending money and everything. And I said, well, actually, I do think I should talk to my dad, because I think my dad will be my advisor.
Yeah.
And Alan said, yes, I think you're probably right, you should.
Yeah.
Now, that was a wonderful piece of advice, because a lot of youngsters who sign for Saints, if you ever get to tell them, they'll tell you they signed for 40 quid. Alec Murphy signed for 80 quid. They actually kidnapped Alec Murphy on his 16th birthday, took him to a house down the road here, and they locked him away till he was 16, and then they signed him the next day. That's true.
Serious.
Absolutely serious. Joe Harrison was one of the directors of the Saints, and there were 3 other clubs wanted to sign him, and they were at the ground, and they had him in Joe Harrison's house, and they kidnapped him and signed him on.
The original mafia of rugby league, innit?
They used to talk about the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker. Right? Now, to be fair, I like being fair if I can. Right? Committees in those days and before, and going back to the 30s and going to the 20s and during the First World War and everything else, they had to find the money, right? They had to find the money to actually get the people to come and play, right?
Yeah.
Now, that was their job. And they also, therefore, picked the teams. Coaches didn't pick. There were no coaches anyway. We'll talk about coaches. There were no coaches. The committees picked the teams. Why am I talking about committees? Oh, because what happened? Stuff never goes through unless it's passed by the committee.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So whatever you're doing, it's got to be passed by the committee. Now I'm talking to the chairman, but he has the board behind him. You think everything's going to go on behind him, but the committees themselves, they were whoever could put a bit of money in the club. Whoever could buy some shares. If you could buy some shares, you could get on the board. If you bought enough shares, you could be the chairman. And that was it. They didn't really have to know that much about the game or do anything about the game. And the time I'm talking about was just after the war.
Right.
Now, 1950s, you don't think that's the war, but you're still rationing in 1950.
Oh, yeah.
So these lads who were coming, the Rugby Union lads, this is where we kicked off, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Rugby Union lads that were coming up, Glyn Moses, for example, and a lad called Don Gullick.
Right.
Don Gullick was a big, rough centre. And I remember seeing him and meeting him and shaking hands with him. And I thought, he's a big bugger, big head, big hands,
Yeah.
Hello, Mr. Gullick, When it came time for me to sign, and they said, what position do you play? I said, stand up or wing.
I'm not lining up against that.
I actually played centre most of my life in Rugby Union.
Yeah.
But there again, selectors. I've played on the wing a lot, and then I played centre, and I became a centre. I played for England. I got to the level of going on tour, and the problem was that year or the year before, 6 of the Lancashire Rugby Union team had all signed professional.
Right.
Ray French, Bev Risman, Parker, Burgess that went to Barrow, Tony Ledbetter. They were all part of that Lancashire Rugby Union team that I played. And the England selectors thought, well, he's going to Rugby Union. He's going to Rugby League.
Yeah.
And so I didn't get picked. Now that sounds like, but it's a fact because one of the England selectors, I was travelling with him on the train and he just said to me, they're not going to pick you. Well, guess what happens after that? If they're not going to pick you, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
You go to Rugby League.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Right?
Yeah. They've sort of made that decision for you in
exactly right.
terms, haven't they?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That is exactly right. Now, in between times, what's going on is I've gone away to college at 18. I've done my 12 months down, 2 years down in London, at St Mary's College, Twickenham. I've gone to Loughborough and I've done another 12 months at Loughborough. So I spent 3 years away at college. I played for Lancashire 20 times on the run, so that was all the way through that time.
That's while you're at college, you're coming.
I was coming back home,
Radio.
and the odd year that I came back in. I played for the UAU, which was good. I also played for Blackheath. I played for Rosslyn Park. I played at Twickenham. I had a good time. I really enjoyed it, and Rugby Union was really good to me in that I was accepted and I did well in it. And so when it came to the crunch, the college principal at Loughborough, now that in PE terms is like the top of the table. There's nobody higher than that, right? Wrote to me in July of 1963 offering me the job at rugby school as a schoolmaster.
Right.
Said the job at rugby school is available and if you will apply I will recommend you, which is basically
You're in.
the highest recommendation that you can get.
So how old are you at this point now?
22.
22, right.
22 now, right? And I'm still a rugby union player.
Yeah. You turned down Saints and said you're going to think about it.
Yes, but I had then Wigan knocking on my door at 22, and I had Saints knocking on my door at 22, and I had to write back to Mr. Sayer, Clinton Sayer, and say thank you very much for that recommendation, but it is quite possible that I may be a rugby league player in September,
Right.
and I don't think rugby school would like.
Yeah, too well, would it?
Now let's just talk about Ray French for a minute, because Ray French is 1 year my senior.
Yeah.
Right? So Ray French went through Cowley and I was going through West Park, and we've been buddies, chums, call us what you like. We've known each other since we were sort of 15 all the way through Lancashire school days and everything. But Ray French was not allowed in Loughborough because he'd signed for Saints. Right. When he was at Leeds, he did his degree at Leeds. And having done his degree at Leeds, he signed for Saints. Good on him. You know, that's just the way it is. But then Loughborough said, well, you can't come here because you can't play any of the sports because you're a professional and we're totally amateur. And you've got to remember that athletes, gymnasts, sports people of all kinds were amateurs. True blue amateurs in those days. Right. So when I came here, French is in the changing room. Keith Northey's in the changing room, who was my good friend at school, right? And they sort of introduced me in with the other people, and I didn't have a problem. I walked through the door, and I walked in, and everybody said hello and welcome. Stan McCormick was the coach, and he said, what position do you play? I said, stand-off or wing, and he said, right. And I played stand-off. Now, I'll tell you what I did do that nobody else has ever done. My very first game of rugby league, right, was Saints against Castleford on the pitch.
Your first time out?
First time out.
My God.
Yeah.
Right? Now, everybody talks about settling in and learning the game. You know, he's not ready and all of those things, you know. Well, I played one trial game, which was first team against A team, on the Saints ground but with no crowd. Right? And I scored. I was played standoff to Alex Murphy, and he put me through, and I scored on the Eddington end. And this is true. And Alex ran all the way back to the directors in the box, and he shouted, "That's another £1,000 you owe." Now, Alex is supposed not to like rugby union players. Right. Now, I never found that to be true. If you were worth your shirt, and this is the expression we used to use, because you never had your name on the back of your shirt. Nobody had the number 1 shirt or even the number 6 shirt or the number 7 shirt. Number 7 shirt didn't have Alec Murphy on the back. It was the number 7 shirt, and whoever got picked number 7 that week had it. If you were worth your shirt, nobody bothered because it meant you were part of the team. It's not as if you were being paid because we have to pay him because he's got this big contract and there's a lot of contract money. Now, you can see where I'm going here.
Of course,
There's some people nowadays, I believe, who finish up on the pitch and perhaps shouldn't be there. But because they're part of the salary cap and they've got to be paid whatever it is they're being paid, £150,000 a year.
They've got to be on the field.
They've got to be on the field. They've got to be on the field. We didn't.
No.
If you didn't play well, you got dropped. If you got dropped, you played in the A team. If you played in the A team, you were playing for £5 a win and £3.50 for a loss. Now you go to Workington for £3.50 on a Saturday. That's no good.
No.
If you happen to be a glass cutter at Pilks, you could make £20 on a Saturday on a shift that you could just do your glass cutting. So we had lads who were playing. There was like 30, 40 lads together. But if they weren't getting in the first team, they didn't really want to be in the A team either because they wanted to go to work on a Saturday because they're the thing.
I mean, you still sort of see that in the amateur game. It's only professionals where, like you said, you've got the name with the number and that's your shirt. But I mean, in the amateur game, especially when we played, you did have to play for your shirt. If you didn't turn up training and they had, the coaches had an abundance to players to pick from, this is why nowadays, if you get 12, 13 lads training, they're not going to put 110% effort in because subconsciously they know that they're going on that field.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I don't think it'd be a bad move to go back to that, to be honest, to play for your shirt.
Yeah, definitely. You can see, you can't name any players, but sometimes you can see that like they have one bad game and then it almost becomes a routine that they're kind of underperforming, but that they're that team's star player, so they've got to have them out there, even if it's just getting the fans in and keeping them happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's having them names out on pitch.
When I was at keeping the fans happy, when I was at Liverpool, I was still a schoolboy, but I was playing for Liverpool first team, and our captain was a lad called Reg Higgins. He
Right.
played for England, and he was quite a famous rugby union player. And we got news that Tom van Vollenhoven had signed for St Helens. And I said to Reg Higgins, "Who's this Tom van Vollenhoven?" Now,
I'm glad you can say his name.
he had played against Tommy Vol in
There we
That's
go.
easy. Well, you do that one.
In
Tommy,
19
I'll write that down.
1955, right? And he said, "Listen, the people of St Helens don't know how good this fella is.
Yeah.
This fella is a blinder." Right now, the England star in those days was somebody from Ireland, Tony O'Reilly from
Right.
Ireland. He was the star of the tour team, and he'd scored a hat trick against him because he was
Yeah.
just such. He was a 9/600 yard lad. Now, when you start talking about pace,
Yeah.
I always say I'm 6'2" and I'm 16 stone and I run even time. Now you can tell that none of that is true, right? But I was quick.
Checking my glasses on there.
Yeah, I was quick. I was quick enough to stay with Alec Murphy, and Alec Murphy was really quick, but only for 50 yards. Tommy
Yeah.
Vol could run for 100 yards, and Tommy Vol had a fifth gear, which he used to drop his head on one side, and you could see Tommy Vol actually beating people in a straight line. He wasn't a sidestepper all over the place,
Yeah.
but his acceleration was such and his pace was such
Just
that
see a
he
gap
could just
and
he
go.
could just move me. People would line him up and he'd just push him out of the way and just go.
Yeah.
As did Brian Bevan, which was another great player. Different from Billy Boston.
Yeah.
Billy Boston was a bang-em-off player.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
A different person altogether, Billy. But you've got three wingmen there that were all round about the same time. Billy
Yeah.
Boston and Tom van Vollenhoven were the same time.
Yeah.
Both rugby union players, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Billy Boston was farmed when he went in the army. He
Yeah.
was taken under control. The army had a system where these rugby league players that were coming through would be put into the right camp. So Billy
Right.
went to Catterick.
Right,
And that's where they had all the rugby players were there.
It's where
Yeah.
kick and clap is. and
Alex
stuff.
Murphy, well, we'll talk about kicking clap, later on, but Alex Murphy came here to Haydock. Now, nobody knew that there was a place in Haydock. He spent most of his time in the greenhouse looking after the green. But he was playing rugby union
Yeah.
for England, and they loved him. They absolutely loved him. But he was also playing for the Saints at the same time.
Right.
And it was a bit difficult sometimes because they had first, what did they call it? They had first choice of him
Yeah.
to go in there. And sometimes he tried to get out of it, like by kicking the ball over the stand and by just kicking it instead of running with it and what have you. But they loved a lot of rugby union people loved the rugby league style. And when I got in that Saints team, Kenny Williams was the player there. Now, Kenny Williams is the last of the Bledding Williams' brothers. There were 6 or 7 Williams brothers, all from Cardiff.
Okay.
And they were all top-notch rugby players. And Kenny was up here. He was in the Air Force with Alex, and that's how he got his introduction into it. He was a lovely player. He was a beautiful player. He was a terrific centre.
Yeah.
Keith Northey used to play alongside him, and Keith Northey was he had a sidestep 3 foot either way. Keith.
Yeah.
If you were the fullback, you'd never touch him because he could beat you off his left leg or off his right leg. He did it in other nationalities against the fella James from Halifax.
Right.
He was just standing there was James ready to tackle him. He went one way, scored a try, and the next time he came, he went the other way and scored another try. Now, Tommy Vol, Keith Northey, they were the sort of players that could beat men. Now, Kenny Williams was the kind of player that made it all flow. This is where I'm coming into this because I used to be the standoff playing with these people, and we had flowing football. With Bobby Prosser playing scrum half, Bobby was just throwing the ball out to me, I was throwing the ball out to them, and between us we were playing flowing rugby.
Yeah.
Newspaper cuttings tell you that the best rugby that's ever been played at St Helens was played by that particular group,
Yeah.
and we wish we could have some more. However, there was a faction on the board that wanted a big rough centre. We need a big rough centre. We need another Don Gullick. We need a proper rugby league centre that can go off and duff people. So we had people like Mooney who would come on, and we're not in the same class, but we're coming to the kick and clap. You see, aren't we? We're moving towards that. Is it different? What was it different? What do you really want? Do you want Keith Northey, who could tackle anybody and everybody, but he never banged them on the floor and jumped up and down?
Yeah.
You know, he wasn't that. Do you want Bobby Prosser? Bobby Prosser his name should be in every book, because he didn't invent the torpedo pass, but he brought it to rugby league.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So now everybody does it.
Yeah.
But before Bobby Prosser, nobody did it.
Yeah.
No.
So that's an innovation, you see.
That's something with rugby league in general, I think, like, and we're all guilty of it sometimes, but especially, like, if I talk to my dad about rugby league, saying about that, like, what do we want with a rugby team? Like, I love watching, like, Castleford have played this season, a lot of it, that fast-flowing, skillful rugby league.
Yeah.
My dad's definitely a fan of, like, sending 3 big forwards in, smashing into them, and then maybe letting go on the 5th tackle, you know, like, it is a tricky balance that fans struggle with, you know, like, I like a bit of aggression in a rugby game, but you want to see beautiful rugby, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We, Saints, brought a lad from Bradford Northern, whose name will come to me and I can't remember it for a minute, but he was a big centre, a big rugby union centre, right? Now, we had a cracking pack at Saints, right? With people like Cliff Watson. I mean, Cliff Watson was the best prop forward.
Right.
People could argue Mac Tighe was the best prop forward.
Okay.
There are arguments on both sides, right? But Watson could catch me over 80 yards, right? Now, he could catch me over 80 yards in the first minute or in the 80th minute. And in between times, he'd make every tackle, and he used to love lads coming at him and trying to put him down.
Yeah,
because he used to say, keep coming, son, keep coming, son, And eventually, after about an hour, they said, give up. It's just too hard. You know, Cliff Watson came here one day, and my wife said to me, after he'd gone, she said, when he went through that door, he turned round to say something. He said there was no light came past him, and you were embedded on the inside of him. So that was Cliff Watson.
Yeah,
he was a big man.
Yeah.
And people talk about training, right?
I was just going to say, you've got jobs as well while you're doing all this.
He has, but he was a drayman, right?
Right.
Now, a drayman, he could lift up a barrel of beer, which is 366 pints, and lift it up and put it up on the thing there. Now, you're doing that all day long, and you're carrying boxes around all day long. You don't have to go and move.
Exactly.
You're doing it. That's part of your job.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you about Brian. When Brian came over, he came and he couldn't get in the game. Now, he was used to going up first man, taking the ball first man.
Yeah.
And they were pushing him out of the way. Frenchie and Watto and that were just pushing him out of the way. Move. We'll tell you when to come in. And I'm saying, Brian, get behind me. Get somewhere behind me. Get somewhere behind me. And I'm following. It's like following the tanks, right? You're following the tanks. You're going up. You're the artillery. You're coming behind them, right? And then they'd switch and they'd say, Peter, right? And that was our turn, right? Boom. Then we'd throw the ball.
Yeah.
Then we'd get the rugby. Nowadays they're calling earning the right to go sideways. You hear them talk about that, right?
Yeah.
And that's what they mean. Now, these are in the days when there was continuous tackling.
Yeah.
There was no 6 tackles. It was continuous tackling. So you could go from your own line and go 85 yards before they let the ball out to the backs, and then they say you score. They didn't do 85 yards, but 60 yards.
Of course, yeah.
And they go over there. And what used to happen, and this was one of the differences, is that the crowd would begin to build. You could hear the crowd building. And as the tension rose, as you got further up, and you got higher, and it got higher, and by the time you got into the 25, the noise was tremendous.
Yeah.
And the crowds were tremendous. In the time I played, the average crowd was over 20,000. And there were days when it was 30,000. There were days when it was 40,000.
Yeah.
That's better than now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely better than now, by a long way.
Yeah.
By a long way.
It's
In the book, there's a photograph of Alec Murphy's benefit, which was Good Friday, and there are people sat on top of the Eddington stand, all the way along the top of the Eddington stand, and sitting on top of the pavilion.
Yeah.
So I mean, people were being entertained.
Yeah.
Right. We were also being criticised.
Right.
If in the newspaper talks about this creeping barrage, this forwards crash bang wallop opening up front, as has been happening fairly frequently recently, you know what I'm talking about, where there's been too much forward power and not enough backs.
Yeah.
And getting that switch over, when they switched over to us and when it should happen, that was all part and parcel of the Alec Murphy story. Right? Now, I think Alec Murphy is a genius. Right?
Yeah.
Statement of fact, not a legend. He is a genius. Right?
Okay.
But he was bloody difficult to play with.
Yeah.
Because he was an individual.
Yeah.
He was the sort of bloke that would go off the back of the scrum. The scrums nowadays, you can forget it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nobody ever scores off a scrum.
No.
At
They're a
all.
waste of time, in my opinion. to be
Well,
honest.
yeah, you
They
can
really
start
are.
to say what's it right. In our day, there used to be fighting with each other going in. They were fighting to get the ball out.
Yeah.
And you got the ball out, you'd then do something with it. But Alex would get that at scrum half. He'd push somebody off. He'd run 75 yards to the fullback. And if you managed to get with him, he'd say, here you are, there's the wingman, there's the stand off, there you are, and you were in. So if he didn't score himself,
He was always setting
he
up.
always got somebody else in. However, setting up's the word. Alex would set something up and he'd call an open side move, whatever it was. He'd call an open side move. I'd call the open side move. We'd spread them all out. They'd all get there. Then he'd bugger off on his own. And imagine how foolish we all look. And I'd be chasing him and get there and he'd say, where were you? And I'd say, you called such a thing. And, oh, well, I changed my mind.
Thanks for telling us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Alex was a brilliant player, right?
Yeah.
But he played for himself a lot.
Yeah.
He played for himself.
But the thing is, with such a big name like Alex is, it's nice for you to give people the insight of playing with him and what he was like. Obviously, you just think he is one of the greatest, and he is, don't get me wrong, but you give us an insight to what it's like being on the field with him.
You've got to play alongside him. Now, if you read in the book, I do an analysis in the book of who played where in what position and for how long and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
I mean, Alex Murphy used to say, I'm still the best scrum half in the world. Well, yes, he probably was.
Yeah.
But Saints bought Bobby Prosser and then they brought Tommy Bishop in order to replace Alex Murphy. Now, that could have been another self-fulfilling prophecy because Alex told me 12 months before he left, on the 26th of April 1966, I'm going. Because I'll have done my 10 years then. And down the road, we are all a piece of meat, each one of us. They will do with us what they like.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have any options.
Yeah.
You didn't have a contract for 2 years, 1 year, whatever. It was forever, as far as they were concerned. And so they gradually moved Alex from scrum half to stand-off and then to centre. And eventually, as a centre, he said, well, if I'm not a better player than Tommy Bishop, then I'm going to go. But that was an engineered thing as far as I was concerned. But Saints had bought Tommy Bishop came, he goes in the England side. He's now in the Aussie Hall of Fame. So he obviously did very well when he went to Australia. Yeah. So I played with Tommy Bishop as well as Alex. But I also played, I was saying this yesterday at Warrington, I also played with Paddy Gordon. Now, nobody talks about Paddy Gordon as being a good scrum half, but he was superb to play with.
Yeah.
He was a lovely player to play with as a standoff. Because this is another factor. It's who you're playing with and how do you play together.
Definitely.
This is one of the functions at Saints at the moment. Even if they're running in the right places and the right lines, are they together? Have they got the technical know-how to run the right line and pass at the right time?
It's something that seems to come up quite a bit with who we've talked to, like with Andy Gregg and Bill Ashurst, about that team spirit that was in the team. But I mean, you've just said about Alex being a bit of an individual, but then it's how you as a team react to that player being an individial. I know it sounds a bit diluted, but you know what I mean.
You're right. But you see, you cater for the individual.
Yeah,
he is.
because they're that talent, aren't they, you
That's
know?
right. He is your teammate.
Yeah.
and he is likely to score a try, and he is likely to put you through and win the cup or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and he had that kind of ability. And when he wasn't playing, you missed that massive talent and ability on the field.
Yeah.
But then you look round and say, well, how do we get this balance right? And there was a matter of balance there. I mean, Alec was a brilliant player. He was a celebrating player when he came to Warrington, when he was at Leigh. I mean, you can't just keep going to Wembley and not being a brilliant player. However, as a coach, he was a different coach than he was as a player, because he became, let's make no mistakes. If we make no mistakes, then we'll win.
Right.
Now you can see the way that goes. He used to say, you can pass the ball and you can pass the ball, but you three can't. You just make the break, carry the ball, go down, play it, then you go first man, you can pass the ball. And so he reduced down the amount of passing of the ball so that you could have less mistakes.
That's something that's definitely going on now, I think, anyway, with the state of rugby league at the minute. Like, I can imagine Sean Wayne follows that sort of thing quite strongly, you know. We're all fans, he's our main reference.
That's
it's, you can see that it's like, you know, you've got your George Williams, your Lulawai, they can pass the ball whenever, but there's so much of that, like Ben Flower up your jumper, like Tony Clubb sticking up your jumper, you know, run it in, and there's none of that free-flowing rugby.
It's reducing that risk of making a mistake, but it's a bit harnessed for me that I'm not a fan of that style of
It don't make exciting rugby, does it?
No, but that's the coach's angle.
You're
the coach's angle.
Yeah. You can understand it.
You realise that you get to the stage where if you don't win, then you go. Poor old Kieran, as we come back to it now. I mean, I'm sure that Eamon didn't want to get rid of Kieran, but equally Eamon knows that fans want what the fans want, and at the end of the day he would have to sort of do something about it, and Kieran becomes a sacrificial lamb. Do
you think he was kind of just, he's the easier person to, I mean, I know it's a big decision, he's a legend at the club, he's got a statue, hasn't he, Kieran Cunningham? I mean, do you think it was easier to just have him as a thing for the fans, he's sat and just hope for the best afterwards? Do you think it was his fault, or were the players not giving it enough themselves? Do you know what I mean?
My wife always says it's down to the players, it's not down to the coach. I mean, how can you get the coach going? But let's go back to Sullivan, right? Dougie Greenall used to say, if there's a statue to anybody in this town, it ought to be to Jimmy Sullivan, right? Jim Sullivan, as they used to call him. Right? He's a Wigan player. He never played for Saints. But he's the first coach to get him to Wembley and win. Right?
Yep.
And Greenall was one of the great players, and that was his opinion. And if you'd have asked anybody around that time, if you'd have asked Alex Murphy, if you ask Alec Murphy who's the finest coach he ever had, he'll tell you Jim Sullivan.
Right.
I know that for sure, because I've heard him say it so often. Right, Jim Sullivan was the all-round coach as far as they were concerned, because he'd done everything, and as far as they were concerned in those days, he knew everything, right? So why wasn't there a statue of Jim Sullivan?
Yeah. There's a similar thing with Andy Gregory as well. Sorry to keep bringing others up, but there's a similar thing with the rugby league legends at Wembley, and I think Andy Gregory has appeared there more than any other player, or definitely equal to it. There seems to be some people that, I don't know if it's the contemporary thing of choosing someone more right for that time, but there does seem to be I don't know if it's things in the back rooms,
it's to do with statues, isn't it? It's to do with statues. Have you ever seen the statues outside Twickenham?
I've not, no.
They're magnificent.
Yeah.
They're absolutely magnificent, 20-odd feet high, and it's a line out, and it's 6 players, and they're all there. None of them are individuals.
No.
They're rugby players.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in my conversation with you, and I'm going to emphasise this, we, past players, didn't want the statue of anybody to be put anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Because we know that statues get desecrated in time because the person's popularity goes.
Yeah.
I mean, we know as past players, nobody knows who I am. If I walk on the Saints pitch, nobody would know. The fans don't know. You have to be actually introduced to people. That's because, whereas when I was on those town hall steps, everybody was cheering and everything because that was today.
Yeah.
And we were the people of today.
Yeah.
But once you've gone in the past, whether it's Tom Van Vollenhoven or Alex Murphy or any one of half a dozen other people that might have had a statue, we said we don't want one. You can have a statue of a rugby player, but please don't make it one individual.
Yeah.
Because what will happen is that individual will take the blame for having that statue, and it wasn't his fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Who asked him whether he wanted a statue?
Yeah,
Who
that's
said,
it.
do you want your statue, Kieran? He probably said, I don't, because he would know that in time something
Well, yeah.
this is going to happen.
Yeah.
It's
Now,
always a risk.
it's one of those things, you see, where the popular vote, somebody comes up with an idea and perhaps a bit of money and says, well, we'll build a statue, right, to a Saints player. That'd be good, won't it? Because we've got this new thing coming up, it'd be a good idea. And they don't think of the consequences.
Yeah.
10 years from now, I mean, let's take Longy, right?
Yeah.
Longy, possibly one of the best scrum halves there's ever been.
So, Sean Long, yeah.
Sean Long, yeah, Sean Long, right. There was a lovely Sean Long story, I say, but Sean Long could never lace Alec Murphy's boots, and he said, no, but Alec is 51 and he's only 31. That sort of style, you know what I mean? But, I mean, Longy, in his own right, was a terrific player.
Yeah.
And why not have it? And if they put Alec Murphy at Wembley, Sean Long won 3, what's the...
Challenge.
No, the medal, the
Lance
cup,
Todd.
Lance Todd.
Oh, right.
He won 3 Lance Todds, right? Alex didn't win 3 Lance Todds. In fact, he only won 1. But you could argue facts and figures like that all the time.
Yeah.
And your Andy Reggers of this world, who went 9 times, and said, well, I went 9 times and I never got my statue there. So you've got to be very careful with statues.
Definitely.
In fact, I picked a thing here about statues last week in the Daily Mail. There are 4 people with statues. One of them's Churchill. One of them, there are all 4 of them, and all 4 of them are being desecrated now and saying, "Oh well, we don't believe in what them fellas did."
Well,
all that time ago.
Yeah.
Rhodes created Rhodesia, and the money from there. So a statue to you is something you got to be very wary of.
Yeah.
Well, there's actually a statue in Scotland, isn't there, of William Wallace, but it's actually styled on Mel Gibson. So I think all Scottish people are annoyed about that. You know?
Or Michael Jackson at Fulham's football ground. That's an
Really?
yeah, there's a statue of him. I mean, I'm not saying if he has been desecrated or not, but there's some interesting choices where it's like you've got to think ahead a little bit.
William Wallace. I was born in Scotland, and you find in the first chapter of that book.
Johnston, was it?
I was born in Scotland, and my father always said, my mother was a Scottish person. It was because of the war that I was born in Scotland.
Right.
But he always brought me up. Scots Way, Hay, where Wallace bled, off Wan Bruce has often bled, Welcome to Your Gory Dead, Auto History. I was a Scottish person, as far as my dad was concerned. But he wanted me to play for England. And of course, I got that close to playing for England, but never actually achieved that one ambition that he would have liked to have been. Some people say, well, you'd have probably played for Scotland nowadays. You might have. It's a different system. Things work differently. So we move from captains and we move through Corellius. I heard Corellius speak at Alec Murphy's 40th anniversary of his playing rugby, and he was a revelation.
Right.
He was a gentleman. He gave a great speech. He was not so much condescending, but he was very gentle in his manner, and because I didn't know that. I only knew him as that figure on the pitch.
Yeah.
That was, Hellraiser.
So you've got to you're at St Helens and you're playing with all these players and stuff. Just going back to when you first got there, did you feel like an odd one out in any way? Not with your teammates, maybe with opposition and things like that any more than normal? Were you getting any jip for being from Posh Boy Union or anything like that, I
think they covered it up very well.
Yeah.
they were never nasty to us, right? But grammar school boys, you heard that now and again, grammar school boys, and bloody soft buggers and all that. And you get when you go to a proper school, and of course they'd all come. Some of the players had all come through secondary modern school because they were all playing rugby league. I mean, I never played rugby before I went to school, and then it was rugby union, so I didn't know any other game. So I didn't actually. As I say, until I actually went on that pitch, I'd never played rugby league. But the lads like the Barra boys, they're great. The Barra boys are great. They're Tatoethers. Jeff Eaton, he's a lad from Par. I'm trying to pick parts of St Helens, which are that you might recognise, and say they never said, "Oh, he's a toffee-nosed bugger" or anything like that. But there were a lot of us. There were 16 rugby union players knocking about there, and it was more that they were welcoming to me because they knew the problems that they'd all had of coming into the game, and therefore they were welcoming me into it. Wilfie Smith. Now, Wilfie Smith played forever at Saints, and he was the go-to man. If you were short, pick Wilfie. It didn't matter whether he was a scrum half or a standoff or a centre or whatever. He was never going to let you down. They always said that about Wilfie Smith. Wilfie Smith was a plasterer, right? A rough lad, right? But a smashing bloke, right? His father-in-law too. He was the fullback that went from Saints and went to Wigan. Gary Connolly. Well, Gary Connolly's wife is Wilfie's daughter. So you get these things coming through. Because Wilfie was coaching at Wigan at one stage in there. But Wilfie Smith would never have in any way denigrated me or do whatever. And we joined in with them, to be fair. You're in a changing room. You're just lads in a changing room with everybody else. You've got some loud ones. Mick Sullivan was in a changing room when I first went in there. Mick Sullivan was a bit of a nightmare, really, but because he was so selfish. It's all down to me. And to be fair, if you look at his record, he's a legend. Because he's played 30 times for England and he scored so many tries and he did all that. But he wasn't a nice bloke.
No.
You know what I mean? And when you're playing with your mates. As you said, you've got to have that camaraderie, that teamwork that everybody talks about. If you're going to be successful, you've got to have it. Somebody said to me today, actually, about Warrington, not violence, the wrong word. It'll come to me. But you've got to have the cutting edge as well. You've got to have a mixture of nice people, teamwork, enjoying yourself, and at the same time, you're going to score. You're going to score. We were accused of being dead lucky. Saints were dead lucky. You've heard that before. Saints were dead lucky. Why? Because they always scored in the last 5 minutes.
That's what
they do. That's what they do.
My right eye just started twitching.
Because
they are known for that.
They keep on playing, and they were when I played. They were. The great Alec Murphy one was in '66 where we actually scored over time. The referees used to be the only person that had time. There was nobody in the box with time things there, right? And Saints were being beaten. Alex was playing stand-off that day. I wasn't playing, and they'd actually gone past time. But they were time wasting, right? And it was Eric Clay was the referee, right? And they kicked the ball down the field, and he made them go and get it, and they came back, and they deliberately kicked Cliff Watson, or ran offside. They deliberately ran offside to Cliff Watson. Cliff Watson turned round and kicked this bloke, and he got sent off, right? Watson, off. Penalty to St Helens. Now, have you ever seen that in your life? Cliff Watson gets sent off.
And you get the
penalty to St Helens, right? Murphy comes over, puts the ball up right under the post. It's coming down under the post, and Kellett, who was their fullback, an England player, the ball went straight through his hands and dropped on the floor. And Alex and Billy Bennion come flying in, dived on top of the ball, and they all come flying over the dead ball line. Now, I was actually the closest person on the ground to that.
Right.
Because when Cliff got sent off, Joe Cohen said to me, I was sitting on the bench, he said, get in there, get Cliff, don't leave him on his own. So I'd run round and I'd just got to the tunnel as all this happened.
Right.
And they come flying over next to me. And of course Clay comes over, looks at his touch judge who's standing by that corner flag, looks at his touch judge who's standing by that corner flag, try.
Yeah.
Like, well, they go up in the air, they go mad, and they go off because then they kicked the goal, clean kicked the goal, and we'd won the game.
Yeah.
Then you all had to go in the big bath. Now they don't do this today.
I've seen pictures. It looks horrific.
Well, it's about as big as this room. There's a big
Yeah.
bath. It's all about 8 inches high, and you come from one side comes in, and from the other side come in, and you're all in the bath together. Now you can imagine what it's like with 13-a-side rugby players who've just been knocking 7 bells out of each other on the pitch, and then they've all got to go in there, and particularly on that game because it finished in such a way that half the crowd went home and thought we'd lost. And then the other half that fell for them said, no, we won. It was a huge turn up for the book.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying before about the fans being entertained by a team, St Helens perfect for it, coming back in the last second.
That's right. They won it. Oh, and of course they all complained, wrote a letter to the Rugby Union, Rugby League. The referee played over time.
Yeah.
Well, the referee is the sole judge of the time. And if he thinks you're play acting and messing about, then he's just going to keep his clock running till it goes over.
He can stop it at 78 minutes if he wants to as well.
It's up to it.
They can. Clay, of course, was the sort of referee that not many people argued with because he was very definite in what he did. And if he said it was a try, it was a try. Now, actually, it was a try. But for the life of me, Ray French does this a lot, Ray French says he wasn't. It was over the line. He was when Ray got there, but Ray got there for 10 minutes after everybody else. I once saw a try at the Eddington end, and it was a really foggy day, and somebody kicked the ball from the right side, the right wing, and it came over and it bounced off the wall, and it bounced and somebody dived on it and scored. And he gave it because the referee didn't see it. Bounce off the wall.
Play to the referee's whistle.
That's exactly
Absolutely.
That's exactly right.
So tell us what you've done when it ended, your sort of career with St Helens,
at Wembley.
where you've sort of gone from there.
At Wembley, it was lovely.
Yeah.
We'd won and it was lovely, and we went had the dinner, and we had a lovely dinner, and we had our wives with us, and it was we weren't all getting drunk. We wasn't that kind of a team.
Yeah,
right.
It really wasn't, except on one occasion, which we might talk about. But at Wembley, we were all having a nice drink, and I said, in open conversation, I'd like to tell you, because the chairman was there and the secretary was there, that at the end of next season, I'd like to retire because I want to carry on and go back to university. And nobody said anything. It was just passed over. Nobody said anything. Would you like to guess how many times I played after that?
Would it be less than 1?
It was actually 6.
Right.
It was 6, right? But we played on a Friday night and I scored 4 tries. I played on the right wing. Tommy Voll was not playing that day.
Right.
I played on the right wing and I scored 4 tries. And the next day I was reserving the 18.
Unbelievable.
That's...
And is that just because you'd said, hands up, I've had enough, I want to go off and
Nobody
do other things?
retires on our books, they said, right? To quotes in the book, we'll put you on transfer to £1,000 and 100 green shield stamps, and you can have the green shield stamps and we'll have the £1,000. Nobody retires on our books.
Very cutthroat back then.
Oh,
wasn't it?
absolutely.
It seems to be a reoccurring theme, doesn't it, with these players we've been interviewing.
It
They
is.
do so much for a club, then it's just...
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know
it's
Bill
It's a commercial
mentioned.
operation. It's
Yeah.
commercial. You got to remember, you got to look at Bradford Northern and see what happened to Bradford Northern. It was all wonderful and all spend. And this is why Eamon McManus is such a good holder, bank manager who holds the whole thing together. And he's trying to get that for everybody in the Rugby League.
Yeah.
Kukash is a big spender, Let's spend all the money and he will. You spend the money and the clubs will go down the Swanee.
Yeah.
That's what ruins. That's what
ruins
could
clubs.
ruin rugby league.
That's right.
It's always on a knife edge, especially
Right,
teams
so
like
for
that.
me, right, I'm a teacher, so I'm working So I'm not out of a job. I'm working. I go as a teacher, and I played up to November, and they'd said to me a couple of years before, if you don't cut it, we'll go and get that Barry John from Rugby Union. Now, I was fascinated to read Barry John's book, which I read just before I wrote that book. And in Barry John's book, and I quoted in my book, he says the Saints came down to try and sign him, and he wouldn't sign.
Right.
Now, he said he wouldn't sign because he had a broken arm and because X, Y, and Z. He was frightened. He says in there that when the Wigan directors went down to see him, he said he was 9 stone wet through, and they were used to these big, hard rugby league players.
Yeah.
And they looked at him and they thought, well, who is this fella that's getting all these rave notices? But anyway, they didn't sign Barry John, but they did sign Frankie Myler.
Yeah.
So when I went, Frankie Myler came to the Saints. And that was a big money deal. And Ray French had to go to Warrington. I got to go to Widnes. And Dave Markey had to go to Widnes. So there was a fair amount of money went in that move. Whereas I went to Warrington for less than £1,000. And when I went to Warrington, Willie Aspinall was standoff at Warrington. Now, Willie had gone on tour the year before. He toured. Alex Murphy didn't go on tour in '66.
Right.
Now, he didn't go on tour in '66. The reason usually given is that he wanted to look after his business, right? He was in the joinery business.
Right.
But he'd also gone to Lee, and that was what clouds the issue.
Yeah.
And he also hadn't been picked as captain. So those factors all get clouded together.
Yeah.
But the reality, as far as I'm concerned, is that they wouldn't have picked Tommy Bishop, Alex Murphy and me to go on tour. So you got the Willie Aspinall goes on tour. Warrington gets third player in. I don't know which was the Wigan player, but there'd be a Wigan player in there.
Yeah.
That's just the way they did it.
Yeah.
Of course,
They did it so that they all had I'll pick your player, you pick my player in there. So when I went to Warrington, Jackie Fleming was the coach in those days, and I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, we brought you for your experience because you are a utility back. I could play anywhere.
Yeah.
I had played anywhere and everywhere. I played more times. I was on the sheet more times than any other player when I was at the Saints.
Yeah.
Right?
And with that team that you're
With that
involved
team,
in, it's a big accolade,
that's a
isn't
big
it?
accolade. But, and it's a big but, by then, the substitute, you had 2 subs at the end.
Right.
You had a back sub and a forward sub. Do you ever get that now? Do you ever get back subs anymore?
I know,
Never seen a back sub.
No.
We've got 10 forwards we have who are all spelling each other and only playing 5 minutes. It's ridiculous the way that they're going on like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, because I could play in anywhere at the back line, I was often picked on the substitute bench.
Yeah.
And then whoever had to come off, they knew that they had a ready-made person going on there. So when I went to Warrington, I finished up playing standoff at Warrington to Parry Gordon, which was beautiful, lovely to play.
Yeah.
And we didn't do so bad. We got to the semi-final of the Cup. We won the Lancashire League.
Yeah.
And then the next season, at the end of that next season, I said, well, I'm ready to go now. I wanted to go back to Liverpool University, and they said, well, you go. Warrington were fair enough, because they knew that I was a very short-term appointment.
Yeah.
So I went back to Liverpool. I was at Liverpool for 12 months, and I grew to 13.5 stone, and I couldn't run anymore. I was still on the Warrington books. I'm still a registered Warrington player. And their coach, who was the ex-Wigan Joe Egan, the ex-Wigan player, another legend in Wigan, supposed to be the first full-time coach in Rugby League, supposed to be one of the best. He was rubbish. I'm telling you, he was rubbish. Anyway,
We're doing well. That's your only one dig at Wigan so far. Doing well.
That's all right.
I'll tell you a lovely story about Wigan. Joe Egan just left them all. He said, I can't deal with donkeys like these, and he left.
Sounds like a Wigan.
I was a Warrington player, even though I wasn't playing. I was still a Warrington player, and I said to the chairman at the time, I said, well, I'll take on the coaching role to get you through this difficulty.
Yeah.
Now, remember we talked about committees before, right?
Yeah, and
There's
coaches.
a 12-man committee, right? And I went at £50 a month. That was my stipend, £50 a month.
Yeah.
Whether 4 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever, it was £50 a month. And they'd just lost 50-0 and 48-0 in 2 matches together. So they were not doing very well when I went in. I was told we had no money, we couldn't buy any players. These are the only players that you've got. Do your best with them and let's see if you can get through, right? Which we did for the best part of the season. One of the hardest seasons Warrington ever did. And when you look at them on the list, we went up because we'd lost the first 7 games anyway. So it was we did go up the table a bit, but finished sort of mid-table. And then Alec came, right? Now, when Alec was walking round Lee with the cup in the air, he'd already been to us at Warrington the weekend before, and we knew the weekend before he was coming to us.
Right.
And he was coming to us. He came to us, big signing, plenty of money.
Yeah.
They went from no new players to 51, for each year that they went up.
Yeah.
Because what happened was, he bought the board out. Ozzie Davis bought the board out. He bought all the shares off them, and he and the secretary and one other person just took over the running of the club. And they made it into their club, and he was the saviour of the club. Everybody will tell you.
Yeah.
Ozzie Davis come in, saved the club. Well, he did, but he could have done it 12 months previous, but didn't. He chose to let the club die.
Oh, so we could get it for a bit
So
less
we could
coin.
get it for less coin.
It's not daft, is it?
Right. Right. And by then, he had the plans in place to rebuild that stand and to have it as a nightclub and, getting some money coming in and one thing and another. I'm not having a go at Alex because Alex is the right person to bring in.
Yeah.
Because he's the genius and he was still playing.
Yeah.
He was still able to go and manage and control things from the 6th position. But I just said, well, thank you very much, I'll go now. I'll let Alex has come. And I just went and carried on teaching. I went from... Actually, I went to work for Encyclopaedia Britannica then for 12 months.
Yeah.
And then I'd been to university, went back to Encyclopaedia Britannica, went back to school, became a deputy head, and then went to Lancaster University and did another 12 months there.
Right.
So I've actually got qualifications from 4 universities, believe it or not.
It's 4 more than me.
Well,
Not bad for an egg chaser, that.
that's not bad. But it means that I'm not worried now that I haven't got a job playing rugby.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, the poor lads now who have got... Do you know Bennett? He runs the big room up at Saints upstairs.
Right.
Bennett, you might not remember him. Mike Bennett, his name was. He was a second row for Saints a few years ago.
Right.
Not many, 5 years ago. Well, perhaps it's more than that now. When Saints were still at Saints, and he got an injury and he had to give up. Luckily, he'd just been training as a teacher and he was able to go and get a teaching job. So now he's been able to drop into a teaching job and he's doing something hosting in Rugby League. And that's what I expect he's doing okay. But if you finish up with no job and you haven't saved all your money...
Of course, yeah.
I mean, some of these lads are getting good salaries, but they're not saving it.
No.
You hear them and you will have met a couple in the last couple of weeks which have both spent a lot of their money. Down. I'll tell you the story about the ale, right?
Okay, yeah.
Right. We played a game against Halifax in 1965, the championship final in 1965. Now, in the championship final in 1965, going all through the season, they had the Mackeson Trophy. Now, the Mackeson Trophy was sponsored by Mackeson, and they gave us tankards. Every quarter, you got a tankard if you won thing. We won every one, right? Saints won every one. So when we went to the championship final, Mackeson had catered for these 6 teams that were going to be there, but there were only 2 teams there. There was only us and Halifax. There were no others because we'd won all the things there.
Right, yeah.
And we were in the racecourse at Haydock, and it's a long bar, was about 50 yards long, is the racecourse at Haydock.
Yeah.
And when we all went for a meal first, and we had a couple of pints with the coaches and everybody, and then we went back, and it was a free bar for like 2 hours. And I mean, you could get a pint glass and go and fill it up with whiskey and drink it. You could drink a
Proper
pint
free
of
bar.
absolutely anything. It was a proper free bar. And we'd finished, that was our last match.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh.
So,
It's
party time, indeed, party time. And that team just enjoyed itself on that night. That one night, same
Yeah.
thing. The next year when we came, we played at Wembley. And then Joe Cohn said to us, look, you've got a final next week.
Yeah.
Don't you go on the piss, you know. And we didn't. We finished up, tells you this in the book, we finished up in the Golden Egg on Leicester Square on the night of the Wembley final.
Right.
We'd shared about 2 bottles of champagne between all of us and gone out. We were not a drinking team at all.
It's a very different, like I said, we spoke to Bill Ashurst last time, and that sounded like it was a drinking team, you know, like it seemed like it was quite a part of rugby league culture, like even in the 80s and 90s, you know.
They've got nothing else to do.
Yeah.
The lads will tell you themselves. You see, I mean, let's look at, I'm only reading the papers, right? I read in the papers that Saints didn't get a chance last week to get out on the pitch to actually practice their moves.
Right.
Sorry, these are full-time professionals. They're there every day, 6 hours a day. What are they doing 6 hours a day if they can't get out on a pitch? We were talking about understanding, running right lines and stuff like that. And they said, we're hoping to get out twice this week. Well, what are they doing? They're doing analysis of moves. They're doing watching such a body on. I don't know what they're doing. You tell me. They're all there at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
They've all got special places where they can all go. They're not bad players. I'm not thinking any of them are bad players. But surely learning how to pass the ball is an important thing.
Well, yeah.
We only met twice a week.
Yeah.
We only had twice a week. The big change was Joe Cohen, right? Now, Joe Cohen, nobody had ever heard of Joe Cohen. If Feynman walked in this week and said, right, now Joe Cohen is going to take over, everybody would say, who's Joe Cohen? Who's that? Never played rugby league in his life, never won a cap. Stan McCormick used to say, how many caps have you got? You know, when you would suggest something, how many caps have you got? It's as if the number of international caps that you've got made you a good coach.
No, not true.
It's not true. It's not true, right? Joe Cohen was a PE teacher, right? He was a forward-looking PE teacher. Let's put it that way. And he'd come in and he got everybody fit, and then he was McCormick's sidekick, and then he took over. He was the one that came with the stopwatch. He was the one that came and made sure that we were fitter than anybody else. We were fitter than anybody else. We could run longer than anybody else. We could tackle harder than anybody else. We could back each other up better than anybody else.
Yeah.
So that's why, if you want, I've got the Saints Wigan final, and you want to watch it sometime, because everybody talks about Murphy going offside and spoiling it, and Wigan not having a hooker and all. It's all nonsense.
Yeah.
It's all nonsense. Both sides are doing exactly the same thing, because the rule was you put the ball on the floor, you could both kick at it.
Yeah.
That was the rule. The play the ball rule is you put the ball in front of you and both sides could kick at it. Well, of course they kick at it. That's what they do. And you had to learn to put your hand on his foot so he couldn't kick the ball, because otherwise he'd kick the ball through.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a real technique in playing that ball and keeping it going. Plus the fact that everybody was only like 3 yards off everybody else.
Yeah.
It was much closer. Everybody was much closer than everybody else.
Was it 5 yards for a long time? Well,
It was
like
3 yards,
3 yards.
when we played, which is like you've got a lot less time with the ball.
Yeah.
But that means people like Alex Murphy and Tommy Bishop had time to beat you in that 3 yards.
Yeah.
If you were going forward at them, and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And of course, by then, there was no real gain line in our day. People didn't talk about the gain line. The gain lines come later in philosophy in about 1980, when people started talking about the gain line. But I remember talking about the gain line when I was coaching at Warrington. And I remember people who were rugby league players, rugby league supporters, teachers, who were giving coaches to, were looking at me as if I was speaking a foreign language.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, really, this is very simple.
Yeah.
The nearest person to the gain line is the person that picks the ball up. So if he makes the break straight away and crosses the gain line, then you're all going forward, right? If you pass it back 4 times before that player out there who's now 20 yards to run to the gain line and he doesn't get it, then you're being pushed back. And that's the paradox in rugby, isn't it? You've got to pass it backwards and yet go forward.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of teams don't seem to manage a lot of the time as well. They're passing backwards and they're not running. They're not even trying to make progress forward. You know, it's like it's something that seems. I mean, I like watching a lot of 90s and late 80s rugby. That that's when we've grown up watching and stuff like that. And there's so much more free playing where it is just being spread out wide and running on and being passed about, and they're making them yards because it's free flowing rugby. Like, it's going back to what we're saying about now, where there's drives in and it's almost fearful. They're fearful of making that mistake.
But you would have talked last week to remind me of his name.
Bill Ashurst.
Bill Ashurst.
Yeah.
Now Bill Ashurst was a very good forward, right?
Yeah.
He was a very good forward who could make breaks himself, but one of his classic moves was the chip over and run round and catch it. And I'm sure he talks about that. I've not heard the podcast, but I have read his book, and therefore he had that confidence in himself. Now, how many of forwards nowadays are even running with the ball in their hands?
I know.
Yeah.
It's tucked in there, make certain they don't lose the ball, charge in, head down, bang on the floor,
That's
right?
it, yeah.
And the main aim seems to be to get down on the knees so they can play up. And the main aim of the tackler seems to be to turn them over so they can't get up.
Yeah.
So you've got wrestling, and you've got wrestling being brought into your routines. And what have
it's
you.
a big part of it, isn't it?
I don't know whether Saints had wrestling last week, but they couldn't get out on the pitch.
No.
Now, you've got to balance those things, haven't you?
It doesn't make sense at all, that, does it? Like you said, the full-time professional players, like, you think they'd be out on the pitch for,
They have
4
enough
hours a
time,
day.
don't they?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
a full-time job.
Yeah.
I understand, don't get me wrong, I know they're in the gym and, like you said, they're doing analysis and they've got to get their eating right and all that, but fundamentally you're training for those 80 minutes on a Thursday, Friday or Saturday, so get out with the ball in your hands.
You see
simple.
Reagan Grace play yet?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Right.
Watched him tour Wigan apart for a bit as well on Good Friday.
Fantastic
Now
player.
you've seen him, right?
Yeah.
Now you've seen him. Okay. Now what's going to happen to him? Everybody's going to mark him, right?
Yeah,
straight away,
of course,
because
yeah.
you only get away with that once.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then they say, right, Wigan and everybody else will say, right.
You're not
But
doing that again.
what are we doing? What are we doing with him? What are we doing? I'm talking about we said. What are we doing with him? We've got him bringing the ball out from his own line.
That is something that puzzles me.
Absolutely
with
stupid.
Modern rugby.
Now, I did happen to be for a few minutes with the chairman at the last match, and he said, we'll just have to go and buy 16-stone wingers. If they're general coach, if they don't want to use these players for what they're good at.
Yeah.
I mean, you would never have put Stan McCormick to protect the ball out from his own line.
Yeah.
You'd have never put me to bring the ball out from my own line. I would have refused. And so, I tell you what, they wouldn't have even let me.
Yeah.
Watch, he'd have threw me out the bloody way. Move, shift, go.
Yeah.
It's not your place.
Yeah.
Now, 10 forwards, let the wingers do it. That's no bugger. Get smacked with the first 3 forwards that come to him. They love it.
Yeah.
And if you're a forward, you just want Reagan Grace to come running at you, don't you?
Of course you do. We see it all the time with Wigan. Like, they've obviously had to give a lot of debuts to young players this year with all the injuries. As Wigan fans are happy to say, we've had a lot of injuries. But they've like your Tom Davis, your Liam Forsyth. They're running it out on their own try line, and you just see them getting smashed, and they're not going to get confidence from that.
See, you've got Williams, who's an excellent player.
Yeah,
I like him. I think he's a very, very good player, right? Because he gets into the open field and he breaks it all up, and he goes. And he's my kind of player.
Yeah,
right? Reagan Grace would do the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have him bringing the ball out from your own line.
Exactly.
No.
But you see, he doesn't have a number 2 on his back or a number 5 on his back.
That's it, yeah. He's protected with that 6 or 7
systemic.
on the back.
It's systemic. The coaches, whoever the coaches are, I think Australians, I'm not a great fan of Australian coaches at all. Right.
Defensive rugby type.
When I was at Loughborough, the captain of the rugby team was a fella called Roger Pearman. right? You won't know this. But Roger Pearman, when he left, went and played for Wakefield. And in 1963, Roger Pearman played for Wakefield at Wembley and therefore was a successful rugby player, right? He played at Wembley as a successful rugby player. 64-5, he went to Australia as a coach. 66, I've still got the letter upstairs from Roger Pearman saying, Peter, for God's sake, get yourself out here. They've got no coaches in Australia. They're desperate for coaches.
Yeah.
They didn't have any coaches in Australia.
No.
What happened was they turned round and looked at America. Instead of looking at us, they looked at America. And Australian rugby is based on American football.
Right.
The whole Australian game has been based upon American football, which is drive forward 9 yards, then another 9 yards, then another 9 yards, and keep it going on 9 yards.
Yeah.
Right? And that's their principle. And it's get through the middle, all run down through the middle, and now and again we'll run round the outside.
Yeah.
What they've done, what they've managed to do, is get a bigger base than us. They've got, if you think of the pyramid, they've got a much bigger base. So
Yeah.
they've got more people playing in the first instance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
If you build a
massive.
pyramid, the whole idea is that by the time you get to the top, they've got more people at the top.
Yeah.
And that's the difference in the Australian game. They've got more people who have got talent and ability at the top than we have.
That's
Not good coaches.
No.
It's
No,
not,
it's the talent that they've got,
it's
isn't
the
it? I think,
talent.
to be honest, an Australian NRL team, let's just pick, I don't know, let's pick Parramatta for instance. When they're on form, I could coach them that day. Because they do, them 17 players you selected and you start in 13, when they're on form, you anyone could coach them. And it's they've got that pool
Well,
of talent.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't go, right? I didn't go in 66 because I was happy where I was at Saints and I had further ambitions to carry on being a teacher and doing what I was doing
Of course,
here, right? But Tommy Bishop did go.
Making an habit of that.
Tommy Bishop did go, right? And Tommy Bishop turns out to be one of the best coaches,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Now, Tommy Bishop was no more of a coach than anybody in this room,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And Tommy Bishop would tell you he was a lad from Croppers Hill in St Helens that used to play on the Burgies, as they used to call him.
Right.
I'm trying to do that on purpose, right? He was a smashing bloke, right? But he didn't have qualifications. He was a rough bugger. He was a really rough bugger. He lost all his teeth by the time he was 20. Because he challenged everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another difference in the game.
Including his dentist.
The old players have no teeth.
Yeah.
All the new players have all got like shaggy. There were no mouth guards in our day. Nobody wore mouth guards in our day.
I know my dad's lost a few over the years.
Yeah. But everybody did. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not unusual.
Yeah.
Alex Murphy, 5 times he broke his jaw. Now,
Crikey.
exactly. Now, you start looking and you say, now that's the kind of thing that you want. Not high tackles.
Oh, no, yeah,
Right.
yeah. But that passion for...
It's elbow. No, it's people hitting you with the elbows. Now, you start watching your own teams. I can't name players. I'm not going to name players. The same other players. They lead with their elbows and
Yeah.
they run straight in, bang with their elbows and gone there. Now, in our day, that's the way that you got your jaw broken
Yeah.
or you lost your teeth.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
not allowed to hit them.
No,
I mean,
no.
the referees used to say somebody would run at me, a forward would run at me and whack me, right? So if I went and I tried to smack him round the head, the referee wasn't going to say, oh, you can't do that.
Yeah.
He was saying that's fair enough. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you
6
just
to
went
1
and
and
banged into him.
Yeah.
But the big difference was, and this is, I do want to tell you this, big difference was Cliff Watson.
Right.
I'm about my 3rd match when I played over in Yorkshire. I'd been laid out 3 times in the first half hour. Not stretchered off, but laid out on the floor and I
Yeah.
had no idea what had happened. And Watty came over and said, what's going on here? And Smithy said to him, why, that standoff, his name was Royce Sabine, that standoff's hitting him after the pass has gone. Of course, I come from Rugby Union, I was going with the
Yeah.
ball, leaving the head unguarded, bang, out 3 times. So what he said, oh, okay. So he goes from the blind side to the open side of the pack.
Yeah.
And next time this lad comes at me, he comes running at me and I tackle him standing up. I tackle him, what he just shifted me out of the way just by moving, wafted me away, picked him up, shook him like that in the air and then dropped him on the floor and then he trainer came and he was dazed, and he turned around to me and he said, "Are you all right now?" Right. Now, when I knew that Watty was looking after me like that, I could go and hit anybody. Because I'd just say,
Deal with
you've got to get... And Watty'd say, "Yeah, you've got to get past me first." And the number of times forwards would be saying, I'm having you," and Watty's saying, "Yeah, just get past me first." And that, but see, Watty looks after us all.
Yeah.
In Tommy's book and in Watson's book, it's just come out this year. Tommy Bishop says that's why he took Watty to Australia, to look after him.
Yeah.
If you're a scrum half at 5'3", you want somebody who was looking after Gregory. I bet you somebody was.
And
Andy Gregory will tell you who was looking after him.
Yeah. There'd have been your Andy Platts and all that going on, wouldn't they? You know?
That's right.
Your Rod Burrows, you had
exactly,
you had Peacock Redden and people like that who they do look after him.
That's right. You looked at
the job.
You looked after.
Yeah.
I remember who was the lad that used to play for Salford. I've forgotten his name for a minute, but in the semi-final, when Warrington played Salford in the semi-final, I went flying in and banged him. And as I'm getting up, he's got hold of me, and I'm looking around like that, and he just said, "You're not at Saints now. You're on your own." And having that sort of loss of power, the person that what is not there anymore. Colin Dixon was the person that was moving.
I suppose that's another example again of just how strong a team spirit you had. You've got at St Helens, you had them people to protect you.
You had John Mantle, as well as Cliff Watson, as well as Ray French, as well as John Warlow. Dougie Lawton spent a long time with us at Saints before he went to Wigan. And Keith Ashcroft, he was another Wigan player that was at Saints for a while. These were all players that played at Saints that all were part of that functional pack that functioned as a pack all together and fought for each other basically.
That's it.
And we weren't on the piss all the time, but we had plenty of interaction between us.
Yeah.
It was good.
So I'm seeing in front of you there the Is Here Now, it's called, which is a favourite saying of mine anyway, but it's about the career of the rugby league player Alf Ellaby. What's the story with that then?
Alf Ellaby was the first Saints superstar.
Right.
And he gets into the all-time greats. He's one of the greatest 17.
Right.
And he was undoubtedly a great try scorer in his own right.
Yeah.
And when we as past players came to choose the greatest 17, there was no real arguments. There were two wingers, Alf Ellaby and Tom Van Vollenhoven.
Yeah.
And both scored 50, 60 tries in the season and scored 290 tries each of them.
Yeah.
I'm just making those figures up, but and so there's nobody comes near them. So they're the first superstars. And when you look at him, he was like a fashion idol as well. And they used to call He's Here Now, and they used to do it sort of round the town, and the numbers went up. Now, when you read about him, you find out that he was actually on more than anybody else on the team. He'd get a fiver when they were only on £3.
Right,
because he was sharing in those extra people that he brought into the crowd.
Yeah,
now, nobody ever thinks about that now. But when Tom Van Vollenhoven came and played in the first team, and he played one match in the 18, and the 18 crowd was 10,000. Right? And on that one day, they were half paying back the fee that they had the Vollenhoven from there. So when we chose the greatest 17, nobody agrees with everybody else. That's the first thing to say. Everybody else will always say he wasn't the best. Such anybody else was the best. But he was undisputedly picked by everybody, and Tom Van Vollenhoven was undisputedly picked by anybody. You try this at Wigan, go and find out who was the greatest 17 ever to play for Wigan. It's a job we didn't want to do as past players.
Well, that's it, because I disagree with the one that Wigan have put out, and we'd all have different players.
That's right.
You're never going to get it bang on, are you? Everyone's going to...
Right, now what we were prepared to do was to talk about pre-war and after the war, and then Super League.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And look at three different things, and that's where you get coming back to Kieran Cunningham, Sean Long, and people like that. Wellens, they're all part of the present generation. Wouldn't have got in the others. Because it's a different generation, a different world, and all the rest of it. Right?
Yeah.
You get from there. So the Past Players Association, because of the Past Players Association, I met with these people, including Arkwright, Jack Arkwright, old Jack Arkwright.
Right.
Now, old Jack Arkwright was a big second row forward, and he was a big second row forward, and he used to wear a silver leaf, New Zealand, a silver leaf on his sleeve here. And I got chatting to him, and I said, was that a memory of your tour to New Zealand, Jack? Thinking the answer's going to be yes.
Yep.
And he said, it was a memory of my tour, yes, in 35. He said, I never actually got to New Zealand. He said, I got sent off twice in the same match in Australia. And I said, how the hell can you get sent off twice in the same match? And he said, you know what the Australians are like? He said, we were all having a go at each other. All six of them were having a go at me, and I was having a go at them. He said, and the referee said to me, right, you, Arkwright, get off. And he sent him off. And as he was walking off, their captain said, hey, ref, bring him back on. We'll deal with it ourselves. We're enjoying this. So they brought him back on, and he played through the second half, and he was still fighting all over the show. They were fighting at every tackle, and there was really fisticuffs all over the place. Oh. And eventually, in about 10 minutes to the end, the referee sends him off again. So he got sent off twice in the same match, and the New Zealanders banned him, and he never was allowed to go. And that's why he wore the silver fern. Now, how's that? Now, his son played for Saints, young Jack Arkwright, and we met young Jack Arkwright, and his grandson also played for Saints. Arky, he played loose forward for Saints in the 90s. He played standoff as well. Got from there. So that was how past players can go across the generations and you can meet people. Now, those are all sort of old players. What we're looking at with newer players, and then they say, well, people like Wellens who've played hundreds of games, and you start to judge them on the fact that they've played numbers of games, or how many tries they've scored, or what have you. And there's always going to be arguments about who does what, where, and
of course,
when. But after I'd finished writing my book there, which came out after Austin Rhodes' book. Austin Rhodes' book was called A Lad from Donkey Common. Now, I couldn't think of a title like that, because I was a lad from Carmel, but it's not like the lad from Donkey Common, is it? But I chose a title which it was actually written by some journalist, Redhead with Fire in His Boots. That's a direct quote about me, and it's a nice title for the book.
Definitely.
It runs off the thing. Now, I did that book 2 years ago, and in the book I tell one story on one page about my family. And in my family, I had a younger brother called Thomas. There were three of us. There was Peter, John and Thomas, and then three girls, and Catherine and Mary. Thomas died when he was only 12. I was about 16. And I remember the day because I was angry. I was angry because my parents went out to the pub, and I thought that was an awful thing to do. Now, I know that when you go to a funeral, as I've been to one today, you go to the pub and you share it with your friends, and you go from there, right? But Thomas died of Hunter syndrome. Hunter syndrome was incurable, right? It's a genetic defect.
Right.
Now, in November last year, I saw on television a woman who'd set up this GEM appeal. It's called GEM. Genetics, enzymes and metabolic disorders.
Right.
And they're all inherited diseases. And 50 years ago, they couldn't have done anything about any of them. Now they can. They're beginning to make some progress in managing them. They still can't give you full life, but they can manage them. And because they now know more about the genome, because the scientists have learned a lot more, they can now interrupt. They can block the metabolic disorders.
Right.
They can actually change what's going on in your body. They have a port through which they can give you some enzymes to make it all work. And I was taken straight away, and I thought, I've got to do something about this, even if it's only to advertise it.
Yeah.
Now, this lady comes from Rochdale, and if we're looking in the Northwest, this podcast to go to the Northwest, please look up the GEM appeal, GEM appeal, and support it as best you can. Now, I've given 200 books to the GEM appeal, and hopefully they're going to use it for whatever ends that they want to.
That's brilliant.
And for me, if anybody listening to this pod now can go and look at that, and then if they can order a book, better still, because you're helping other people. It's not for me, it's for other people.
Yeah, and it's certainly something that we'll support and promote on your behalf.
Yeah.
I think that's
Definitely, yeah.
That's only right for us to do that.
Just to reiterate, we've got a leaflet here. If you go to www.gemappeal.org.uk, so that's GEMAPPEAL.org.uk, you can go there and learn a bit more about it for yourself and see the great cause that it is.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, I think that's everything covered, isn't it?
All right.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Yeah,
Thanks for your
Pleasure.
time.
But I hope you think it was worthwhile coming.
Oh,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, thank you very much there to Peter Harvey and all his brilliant stories from his time in the game. He might say he's not a legend, but he's a legend to us, I think.
Definitely.
Yeah, so thank you very much for your time, Peter. And we'd like to give another shout out to the GEM appeal that Peter did talk about before. It really is a good cause. Visit www.gemappeal.org.uk and you can find out more information there about a truly worthwhile cause.
You can check out his book as well, Redhead with Fire in His Boots, which looks like an interesting read.
It is indeed. So yeah, we'd like to thank you, Peter, and yeah, thanks for listening to the Can't Speak podcast.
Cheers.
Cheers again.
Hello, it's us again. Just letting you know, if you haven't quite had your fill of the Can't Speak podcast, there's plenty more to catch online. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, searching the handle @Can'tSpeakPod.
I'd like to thank Thomas Griffin of The Splicing Block, who recorded, edited and produced this podcast. He's the man to ring for all your podcast needs.
Also, if you'd like to help us keep this podcast going and continue to bring these insightful and entertaining interviews with Rugby League legends, you could help us by going to our Patreon, which is the Can't Speak podcast on the Patreon website, and you can donate as little as £1 up to as much as you want, and that'll help us get around the country and get to these players that we all want to hear the stories of, and we'll continue to bring these interviews to you. Thank you very much.
What a magnificent play!